Lovely. Okay, right. Well, let's kick off. So happy New Year, everyone. So I hope everyone had a great break, and colds permitting, we have a great year. So let's just get into business. So first things first, Daniel. Apologies. I think there are two apologies for tonight's meeting.
Yes, Chair. So I've had apologies from Councillor Wen and Councillor Liver.
Very good. Okay, so if I look around the room, I think we're more than quorate, so we can proceed with the meeting.
Yeah, if we can just vote to accept those apologies.
Okay, vote to accept, please.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Lovely. Okay, so declarations of interest. Would anyone like to declare anything? Very good. Item 3, Chairman's report. Those items. Other than happy New Year and the fact that it's my birthday, I have nothing to report. So 53 today. Any? I've got
Next year, we haven't got an excuse next year.
any pleasure items to review?
Nothing to report forward, Chair.
Thank you. Item 4, public questions. Have we received anything?
Nothing received, Chair.
Nothing received. Great. Okay, so we've got a couple of items of minutes to go through, and then I've got a couple of key items, including budgets. Very important. So let's go through the minutes in. Let's go through the minutes from the previous corporate policy meeting on 8th of November, on pages 1 to 3. Do you have any? Okay, just quickly, any comments, questions? No, we good to accept, vote to accept? We're done, thank you.
Can I ask you to sign it, Chair?
Yes, of course.
So if you can just do initial the other page and then sign the last one for me, please.
This one here.
Yeah, just initial that. And then we'll find a date for the 10th of January.
The writing gets worse if we. Thank you, then. Okay, moving on to the minutes for the Accounts and Risk Subcommittee, also from November, pages 4 to 9. Any comments, questions?
Sorry to be a pain, because I know it's rubbish when people keep asking questions, it takes ages, but so Calvin was the only person, I think, that was in this one. It might just be a very easy one. 8.6.2 says the total funds available in the bank accounts as at the 30th of September 2023. 457,556.5. Now, obviously, we're looking at lots of accounts and things today.
Yeah.
And that doesn't coincide with anything I've been able to find on what we've got
No, so
in the bank account. So, sorry, I said a question.
it's right. So in the report that was presented at Accounts and Risk, it's got the breakdown of the various different accounts, but there's nothing in the agenda that ties back, in the CPF agenda, that ties back to the Accounts and Risk minutes, because that was in the Accounts and Risk report and in that agenda.
Right. Okay. I just wondered where, because what the note says is note that the total funds available in the bank accounts, they're suggesting that all the council funds in bank accounts is 457,552, and we know that that's not right from what we're looking at today.
So where that's what's readily available in our bank accounts, that which the investments that we have is separate and is in that 8.7 item. The amount isn't referred to in the minutes, but we've got that.
Right. So that's not total funds in all bank accounts, then?
No.
It's just a bank account that was specifically referred to in relation to the discussion on the bank conciliation.
Yes.
So, right. Okay. Okay.
Councillor Fisher, would you prefer that we sort of clarified that in some way? I think I want to leave any misleading statements in the minutes. And then maybe if you refer to the specific accounts in question and the term total funds available, just to clarify that statement.
Yeah,
what does that mean?
Future minutes, that's fine.
Or why don't you say is 457,552 plus investments, see 8.7?
Is that the correct accounting. So as Councillor Ray mentioned, so it's 457, essentially like your working capital. That's your kind of,
Yeah, what we've got available.
your for the.
Oh, so it's
your operations
available,
expenses.
that's the key word
Yeah.
there. Right,
So I think that's effectively the current account, if you like.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Sorry, sometimes you just need a vocab list, don't you? So that's all.
All right,
I'm just getting used to it,
it's
I'm
a good
sorry.
point. It's a good point.
So I think that's probably the solution then, isn't it? That's, yeah,
So we'd say available
it's clear.
457 plus investments. Okay,
Yeah, can do that in future minutes as well.
thank you for the observation, the proposal. Any other observations or questions on the minutes? Are we okay to accept the minutes as amended? Vote to accept, please. Thank you. Do I need to sign?
No,
Okay,
it's just purely this committee is noting the minutes from the accounts and risk and the was it the dementia working party?
yeah, so the next item is to receive the minutes from the Dementia Friendly Committee. Do we have any questions on the minutes from that meeting, please?
No, it looks like that's taking off though, doesn't it? Like the supporting vulnerable people, and hopefully the 40 people for the coming week is going to increase over time. Now that it's got some momentum, I think it's all looking really promising. I've been very observation, Chair.
I could just say, Chair, so this will be the last dementia friendly working party, and then as Councillor Fisher said, the supporting vulnerable people will be the new working party going forward.
Yeah. Understood. Okay, do you have any comments or questions regarding those minutes, please? No, vote to accept, please. Thank you. Good. Okay, so moving on to the officers' reports, and the first item is the board planner and the resolution tracker. And you just want to take us through that? Anything to highlight to the councillor, please?
Thank you, Chair. So other than the community grant fund review, all of the items on the resolution tracker have been marked as complete from our last meeting in November. The community grant fund criteria review is due to be discussed at our next meeting in March. At the same time, just to note, at that meeting in March, a reapplication from the hedgehog sanctuary that we discussed last time will be presented in March. There was an issue with them getting their accounts and trustees report to us in time for this meeting, so it's been deferred to the March meeting. But happy to take any further questions.
So I recall from a previous discussion, there was an application for funds which we considered, but then we noted there was quite a healthy cash balance on the trust sort of balance sheet, which suggests they didn't need the funds, or maybe this wasn't the best use of our funds. Has there been any progress on that issue?
Not particularly. The responses I've kind of got back is, all right, okay, everything's been accounted for. We know where we're spending our money. Our accounts are due out soon. Once we've got them, we'll be able to show you and show you.
So we can make a decision based on the latest accounts.
Yeah.
Okay. But the same issue might be there. Essentially, if they're very cash positive,
Yeah.
then we'll have to take a judgment whether or not that's an appropriate use of our funds.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. So we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments on the rest of the resolution tracker, please? Vote to accept. Thank you. Right, next item is the budgetary compliance. So the detail here. So Daniel, just want to walk us through that, highlight any key points that you want us to focus on, please?
Yeah, of course, Chair. Thank you. So the report reflects the financial position as at the end of November 2023. If I can draw your attention to Appendix A on page 19, we're currently showing a year-to-date favourable variance of nearly £45,000. At previous meetings, we've already discussed the increased investment interest, the new commercial income stream of the Mugger and the tennis courts at Rothamsted Park, and the increased election costs. The only new material variance to bring to your attention is the variance that's described in paragraph 3.15, where due to the timing of when the artificial grass pitch opened in this year, we haven't achieved the full income target this year, but it's just a one-off timing issue.
Yeah.
Come next financial year, when the pitch is open for a full year, the target will be achieved. But I just wanted to point it out because of where we've had the previous good news of the tennis courts in the Mugger. That's kind of hiding that variance, if you like, but it is an in-year variance that I wanted to highlight.
But proportionally for the, let's say it's 3/4, is it reaching what you
Yes,
estimated?
yes, it is, yeah.
Sorry, I've interrupted you.
No, that's
Sorry.
right, so,
Good question. Thank you.
but, yeah, that's maybe you have to take any questions, so.
Right, so I've got some questions on the budget rather than the. Okay, so our committee is being asked to do two things. One is to note the report itself, and secondly, we want to note the release of the reserves, which are planned.
Reserves that have already been released, and there's a couple that are due to be released at future council meetings.
Anything you want to highlight in those releases?
So everything that's been released to date, where the meetings that it's been released at has been quoted there. The new items are the floodlights at the tennis courts and the Mugger in Rockhampstead that's to be released. An earmarked reserve for IT equipment that was created at year end, so sort of at the beginning of the financial year. And then we've got a 10,000 of capital to be released, which is for the new approach for dealing with green waste, where we've got a using site at Marquis Meadow to store our green waste and turn it into compost. So that's part of the programme of works for taking over the grounds maintenance work and creating the town ranger team, that all of the leaves and grass that we collect, we can keep there and turn it into compost rather than send off site anywhere else.
What will they do with it once they've composted it, do you know?
I don't know how much there will be. I don't think there's any intention at the minute to offer it out to anyone, because I think we use a lot of compost ourselves at various different sites.
Just back into the soil.
Yeah, I think that would be the plan, but I'd have to confirm that.
No, I was just, I mean, it's not, I was just curious.
Yeah, I think once it's all there and working and we know how much we've got, we can then make a call in the future, I think.
Not gonna get burned, is it?
No,
Near
no.
anyone's properties or anything like that?
We're just looking at essentially the statements on page 20. It just brings to home how important our commercial income is. It really helps, obviously, I guess that helps to sort of inflation proof our budget to a certain extent, doesn't it? So, okay. So any questions or comments regarding the budget for this financial year? Are we okay to both note the report and note the release of the reserves? Can we vote in favour of that, please? Very good. Okay, so that's item 7.2. So if we can move on to 7.3. So quite a bit of detail here on the budget for the next coming year. Can you walk us through that, please, Daniel?
Yeah, of course, yeah, thank you. So we've been through the budget a couple of times already last year, and this is the version that we're proposing goes on to council at the end of the month for final approval. The previous target was that the precept increase would be below the 9.1% that was previously presented. This target has been met, and the precept that's been proposed is an increase of 8.4%. The changes between the report presented in November and this version are shown in the table on paragraph 5.2 on page 22. The main item being reflected is the reduction in inflation rates. So previously, the July RPI figure of 9% was being used, whereas now we're using the latest RPI figure of 5.3%. All of the budget variances between this financial year and next financial year are shown on in Appendix B on page 29, with the main items being the setting up of the town ranger team, employee costs and the contract inflation are always the main items, but yes, guess I'll pause there and have to take any questions.
I mean, it seems we sort of weathered the inflation storm of the last year or two reason as well as we could have expected, I think.
Yeah, it's all kind of gone as well as it could, I think.
Okay.
A very basic question, and again, it might be very easy for you to answer, and it is probably just me. But discuss the precept and obviously trying to keep it low for people, and I understand that, and I think that getting the figures as you've done it is brilliant. You know, obviously shifted loads of things around, and that's awesome. What I just couldn't quite make work was that we've got a total budget of 1948, as you're saying, 2.1.1 on page 21. Then on 2.1.2, the precept is 1554. So then we've got a shortfall of 394,000.
So if you have a look on page 28.
Yeah.
The commercial.
Yeah, it's all of the.
Yep.
So that's 394, that's the income target that we're looking to achieve, so at the bottom there.
Is it in a colour?
Yeah,
Help
so
with that.
either look in the green or the
Oh, yeah,
beige,
yeah,
you've got the 394,530, so it's the
So,
income target, so
yes.
the commercial income and the investment interest.
okay.
So
So we're relying on everything working, markets continuing and all that sort of stuff. Which is obviously, I'm not saying it's not reasonable, I'm just saying that's what we have to rely on.
Yes,
The precept is going to,
yeah, so
it's there,
yeah,
yeah.
there is yes, exactly. So there is that gap between the precept we're requesting and the amount of expenditure we're going to have. So some of the income items have gone up slightly with inflation, others, like when we've spoken about the investment interest in the past, as that's likely, as our capital receipts reduce and our investment interest reduce, that's been reflected in the budget as well. So it's that 394 is a realistic target for us to achieve.
yeah, okay.
Out of interest, if you look at the line of the 394, how much of that's contracted in before the start of the year and how much of that's dependent on? So if you take things, for example, like common and greens, which is obviously people, circus or whatever, contracting in, how much of that's a recurring item that's already locked in and how much of that's?
It's changed now, so we've got, I can't remember the exact figures off the top of my head.
I was just wondering whether any was.
So we've got the agreement with the new agreement with the artificial grass pitch.
Yeah.
We've got the agreement with the golf course. We've got the ice cream van tender that does well for us. The parking income is it doesn't vary. Obviously, it varied over COVID, but it's now coming back up to pre-COVID levels. Just trying to think whether. I think that's.
Again, my sense is, answer to your question, probably relatively little is sort of contracted.
Yeah.
The rest are essentially contingent upon Harpenden remaining an attractive place for people to visit, shop, do business, etc., which we would hope would continue. And on that basis, people come to visit, set up shop, park their cars, set up their circuses.
Well, I suppose another way of looking at it is the COVID year. What did that income line, what was that in the COVID year?
Oh,
Rough.
it,
I think it was.
Zero.
yeah, it was, I think we were just pretty much on a tiny bit of car park income, and the farmer's market was one of the few things that could carry on, so it was,
So it is pretty much variable income then.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
And I'm really sorry, I did have some questions.
No,
about this. So there was reference in our expenditure for the town rangers. That was an ongoing cost that we needed to budget for. And then that also comes up at various points with various capital investments as well. And I didn't know whether that should be something that should be in one of those things and not so like the outgoings, like the ongoing costs and expenses and capital expenditure, and whether if we took it out of one, whether our financial position might be a little bit better. I didn't know if it'd been double, put in twice. That was my question. It obviously won't have been, there'll be different, expenses for different things and costs and purchases and things, but it just seemed to me sometimes there was exactly the same reference for town rangers and what they were up to, like equipment, for example, that was in expenses, but obviously that's something that's a capital investment, isn't it? Like the equipment and stuff that you bought for them.
so all of the equipment has been purchased through the capital receipts reserve.
Yeah.
Not built into the budget. I think the plan is
Right.
to hopefully top up that reserve again over the next few years. So when we're in a position when all the equipment comes to an end of life, we've then got enough funds. But the town ranger service has to be funded from our revenue budget, as it will be an ongoing cost.
Right. Okay. But they'll still need bits of equipment, which is why we see it in the budget for capital costs as well.
Yeah, in this year's budgetary control.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. So that
So
one.
that's why I keep seeing reference to, because it just, everything adds up. If you keep looking at it, it's like, there's more on town ranges, there's more on trees, there's more on tree management, tree planting, more town ranger stuff. And it just seemed to come in every sort of spreadsheet.
So I think, so as we get into next financial year and the budget monitoring, all of the equipment would have been purchased in capital, so that will stop, and it will just be purely the ongoing revenue costs going forward once we get into but that will be in the monitoring next year. It's just as we're in the crossover period, if you like, at the minute. So by putting the team in place and buying the equipment, so we're good to go come the 1st of April. It's just a bit of a crossover period.
And is that crossover process on target? Because what we don't want to do is any delays maybe on our side where the team's not up to the right level or whatever it is, and we're then having to continue to pay them, but we're still having to keep on the contract from SADC. So is that on target?
Yes, so very much so. I think the new town rangers seem to be doing really well. They've been on so much training. It's brilliant to use all of the equipment that we've got and making sure everyone's fully capable of using everything we've got. So I think I'm confident we can just hit the ground running come the new financial year,
Yeah.
1st of April, and we kind of step away from the John O'Connor contract.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? And a minor one, just on the election costs, my understanding is that we're liable for, obviously paying for the town council elections. We won't be liable for the costs of a general election
No,
that takes place. That's not in our purview.
No.
That's my understanding.
that's correct. So
Just wanted to check that.
So the way the budget has been set now is that we'll put more into earmark reserve each year. So in 4 years' time or 3 years' time now, when the next
town council elections, we
we've
fund that.
got enough to
Absolutely.
fund out it. But
Right.
if there's a general, that won't be.
That's not our responsibility.
No.
No, very good. Okay, I also noticed in 9.4, just the, there's a change in the timing of the cash flow regarding the preset payments. So there's like a split payment between April and September of the payments that we get from SATC. Does that cause us any cash flow challenges? Have we factored that into our cash flow forecast for the year?
Yes, Chair, so that's been factored in. So 2 years ago, we would receive 100% of our preset in April.
Yeah.
But then district realised that they were it wasn't very good for their cash flow because they were giving us the 100% of our preset, but then they were collecting that council tax over 12 months.
Yeah.
So we came to an arrangement where this financial year we received 75% in April and 25% in September, and then come April it'll be 50-50 in April, September, and that'll be the new arrangement going forward.
All right, okay, fine.
So that will have an effect, won't it, on our, potentially, on our, well, I suppose we spend it all there, don't we? I was going to say it's not going to have an effect going forward on our projected interest that we would get on investments, but we spend all the presets anyway, don't we? So
Yeah, and it's really, I've built that into the cash flow going forward, so it shouldn't have an impact.
Good. Any more questions regarding the budget for next year? Thank you. Vote to accept the budget and recommend that it goes to the council. Very good. Thank you. Okay, so item 7.4, review of our control and audit arrangements. Walk us through.
Thank you, Chair. So just so the committee's aware, there's no material changes to the arrangement. It's just a chance for councillors to review the document, really. You may wish to note that regarding the fidelity guarantee, so just a bit of extra on that. So that's put in place to make sure that if there's an event of adjusted funds following employee fraud, that we've got enough insurance cover for that. It's provided in round millions. So at the minute the cover's £4 million, and I'm recommending that we keep it at 4 million. If I've got things right, we're just on the cusp where we could reduce it down to 3 million, but I'd rather be prudent and keep it at 4 until we're definitely below that 3 level. It's difficult to work out the exact premiums because they do it as part of a big group package, but it's about £1,200 for the 4 million. So if it's reduced down to 3, we're probably only going to be saving a couple of £100 on the premium. So the risk versus reward on it just felt.
Yeah, you get purchasing power from insuring more risk than. Yeah. Okay.
sounds sensible to me.
Okay, and so there's any material changes in the arrangements since the previous?
No, it's been the same for the last.
And have we found that those previous arrangements were fit for purpose? Were there any defects, anything missed, any gaps?
It's all the relationship that we've got with the internal auditors has been really good ever since I've been here. I think the only anecdotal bit really was, I think my first year when I started, it wasn't the best when it was my first year. It was COVID, and it was a trainee auditor that I had. That was his first time looking at our. So between us, we kind of made it work. But then since then, we've had really good auditors check everything that we've got a really good relationship with. So I'm pleased with the service that we've been getting.
Please.
Quick question on 3.6, 3.7. You've got 27k is the premium for the fidelity bond. Is that correct? There's in total this policy cost over.
I think that's for the whole policy, not just the fidelity guarantee element. So
but But then in the first sentence, you've got the council spent over 45k on insurance policies. What were the others?
So you've got motor, but I don't think it's included in there, which is the big one, and policies have we got? I can come back to you on that, but it's definitely, motor's the other big one, but it's,
If motor's the main one, that's
Yeah.
fine.
You have occupied liability and things like that, won't you, for the public forms and.
I think that's included in the
Oh, sorry, I don't know what
public
page I'm
liability,
looking at.
31, sorry, and 3.6.
Yes,
So
I mean, overall, if you're paying 27k for a 4 million line, that's 0.68% rate on line, which is cheap.
So I think the 27k is, so that 4 million is, well, let me start again. So the 27k covers that whole package of public liability and includes the fidelity guarantee.
Yeah.
So of that 27, I think it's about £1,000 is the fidelity guarantee bit. So
That's cheap.
okay, so the 27k, so to Councillor Ellis's point, the 27k aligns to the council guard scheme coverage, right? And are you sort of employees public? Okay. Okay, thank you, Councillor Ellis. Any other questions? Okay, going to accept this the review of the controls. Good, thank you.
Is that a template or did you have to draft all of that?
the
What we just voted for? Control, page 30.
a bit of both.
Okay.
It's kind of, I think with all these documents, I think they start off as make them somewhere and then they just get changed each year, like over the years and tweaked as needed.
Okay.
Very good. Okay, so if we move on to 7.5, please. This is the risk management strategy and the risk register. And just walk us through any key points to highlight, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So these documents have been reviewed as at the Accounting Risk Subcommittee, as you mentioned earlier, when going through the minutes. So what we're asking is for this to be recommended by yourselves to go on to full council at the end of the month for approval, in the same way as the budget will be. So if I can just highlight some bits on the strategy for you. So the idea of the strategy is to give us a template about how to set out our risk register and how to apply the strategy to our risk register. So we've got the relevant people involved in the risks at the beginning, and then the main thing is the matrix on page 44, and then after that it gives detail in the appendices about how we've come to those impact and likelihood levels. That's used then, as I say, to bring together the risk register. With the risk register, that is presented as at a point in time, so pretty much at the end of October, because we met in November. But just for peace of mind, the risk register is looked at all the way throughout the year, and each risk is analysed properly. But this is just as at a point in time that you're approving. With the risk register, it's a massive document, and that's why I haven't presented it in part of the report, but obviously it is available online if anyone wants to check it. But there's like 94 pages of however many 100 different risks that we go through. The idea on the risk register to make it slightly easier to read and highlight the bigger points. If a risk is amended in any way, it's highlighted in yellow, so any amendments are highlighted. If it's a new risk, it's in green. If it's a risk that's no longer occurring, it's in red. So those red risks will be removed next year. The green risks will turn to white normal. So It's just to try and highlight everything, all the changes that we're making as we go through the year.
I suppose one of the things I was interested in was to what extent you sort of report on how they improve. So obviously the part of the exercise for the risk committee is to see whether we can make big risks less of a risk going forward, mitigate them, however it might be. I just wondered how that was picked up.
So the key part of that for me really is keeping, rather than say we've got the Christmas Carnival as a big event that we put on, to have the risks for that event. What's happened in the past is we've had Christmas Carnival 2022, delete that off, and then a completely new one of Christmas Carnival 2023. What we're trying to do now is to keep those risks the same and just have it as Christmas Carnival. And then in an example in previous years when we've had horses as part of the carnival parade, that those risks are highlighted in there.
So no, agreed, but it's slightly different. So what I was thinking is, for example, if you take the estate's maintenance, so a risk of that is poor performance, and it's a risk that's being demonstrated from what we can see. So one of the things we're doing to help mitigate and improve that is taking it in-house. So when hopefully in-house shows that that has improved that, and we feel that that's less risk, I think if you were to look at bringing in-house the estates, a large part of that I think is around risk and giving us a better service, then hopefully that would move that on the risk register from being something which is a big concern, that's why we spent quite a lot of money on it, to being something which is maybe a medium concern.
Yeah, I think
it's just quite good, as you do good things to mitigate these risks, it's sort of almost worth demonstrating some success on the back of it.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think certainly take that on board. I'm not. Okay, make sure that it's certainly that will be reviewed as part of the risk register. I wonder if it's.
I mean, some risks you can't. They are what they are. And you're not with it. But obviously, part of the exercise is to identify things where you can do things to mitigate or improve, and then sort of reporting back on what you've managed to do. That I think is really good, because I think it's one of the ways of demonstrating that we're doing you are doing a really good job of improving and de-risking. And I think if we look at it, quite a lot of what you are doing is actually de-risking. So even if you look at another example we had, which was floodlights up by the tennis courts, well, that's reducing a number of risks. And in this day and age, so much of life becomes around risk management and how that drives the other responses and other things we do.
Yeah, so you should certainly see that in the risk register this time next year once the service is bedded in. Yeah,
I mean, for example, one of the ones you have like a heat map with the risks on the heat map, and we show that go back to your diagram on I think it's 44. You just show them going lower down and to the left into the green bit, away from up at the top right, which is in the red bit.
Yeah, I think one of the point I want to add is that the risk register is designed in a way that is so detailed for each activities, and it is partly answer your question is that before the event even happened, they list out all the risks in different levels. So the likelihood and the impact might be high when they're assessing it, and then they will plan about what kind of mitigations and control procedures. So, for example, the likelihood and the impact may be 10, and up to the 20, it will be a red flag. But then they think about a lot of procedures before the event. For example, sending a control and security guard in the Christmas Carnival. They will then have another part that is mitigated.
Yeah.
Risks.
And I think that's absolutely right. I think as I say, the thing I'm sort of quite interested in is how over time we're improving. So if you look at 1 year to the next year, things like financial risk or these things are just becoming less.
Less.
Obviously, new things are appearing on the risk register all the time as well. You're sort of having success in managing those risks now.
Well, you just have an extra column, don't you, can show changes.
You could do, it could be yes, just year on year or trend changes or something.
I think before that, you think about this and after the event, for example, when the next year's the same event come, you summarize what can be do better, and then you will add it into that mitigated plan, the procedures, and the risk level will be even low. I think that is
You can use the risk register to manage the risks. Mine's more of the reporting back on how did we at the end of the year, how did we do on managing the risks and how, better next year, or what did we do better? So year on year, you hopefully see an improvement.
Yeah, I think they are improving, because I see the highlight changes, they're improving certain steps each year for the similar activities, but not necessarily everything can be improved.
Well, so in terms of, so I think the framework itself looks fine. It's very similar to the stuff I've seen sort of private sector scenarios. I guess my question about kind of operationalizing this, you said, there's a risk register, which I looked at, thought, okay, there's a lot of things there. In terms of adoption, if the talks about adoption is a big issue in operations, you can design something that looks wonderful, but do people use it? Do they use it in the right letter and spirit? So how are you finding adoption? And then how do you sort of track, how do you report sort of the quality of the process? I don't know whether there's like a calculation you can have in terms of the average risk and how many variations you find, like you thought something was low risk and then something happens. How are you adopting and operationalizing the framework?
So certainly operationally, every member of the team has their own risks and looks after their own area. Each year, it's a case of going out to the team, speaking about it in the all team meetings and saying, right, okay, these are your existing risks. Can you check them to make sure they're updated? Can you just stop and give yourself 10, 15 minutes to think if there's any new risks that need to be considered? So certainly operationally, I think it's
So it's being adopted, people
Yeah.
are using the tool, they're getting things on the register, they're keeping them updated as required.
Yeah, definitely.
And in terms of the sort of so how do you measure sort of variation? Because in good faith, somebody might say, I don't know, it's a 4 or something. And let's say they've come to that judgment in good faith, but actually it's something very different. How do you look for defects in the process? We think actually, you said 4 and as reasonable, but actually we think it's now at 12, or how do you look for sort of defects and feedback in the process?
So where the risk register is starts with a big spreadsheet.
Yeah.
With that, that's certainly utilised. So the best example I can really give was over COVID,
Yeah.
where you've got the same risk, but
In a different context.
12 different people looking at it slightly differently.
Yeah.
So it was how if we were to hold an event start hiring at Park Hall again, what would the risk be of COVID? What would the risk be if COVID was to be caught by the team in the office? What would the risk be about having an outdoor farmers market? But if it's so everyone looking at a similar risk in slightly different ways.
Yeah.
So it's certainly if there's an overarching risk, those things are picked.
So that's a really good point. So you've got a good framework, but reasonable people, even with a good framework, might disagree. How do you kind of control for that and try and minimise the subjectivity and the variation? Do you get people to sort of have like a sort of 4 eyes approach? I might check your risks, or how do you sort of control and get standardisation?
So within the strategy, it's trying to, so in Appendix B, so page 48, 49, is making sure that everyone's aware of these sort of guidelines, if you like.
Yeah.
To make sure that everyone's applying the risks, the likelihood and the severity of the risks in the same way. But I always kind of add that note at the bottom of page 48 where it's okay, so none of these are perfect and you have to use common sense in it. It might
You're not going to nail somebody's, to the wall. But I mean, okay, let me ask you another question. So how do you accommodate disagreement? So let's say you register a risk and in good faith, based on experience, using the framework, you think it's a 4. I come along and I think, "Oh, that's a 12. How do you encourage that? Because you possibly should. Challenge is good. But how do you sort of, manage that sort of constructive challenge to say, well, actually, I think the problem is a 12 this time. How do you sort of accommodate that?
So we've certainly got, as a management team, the risk register has gone through there.
Yeah.
After it's all been collated together, it's certainly any sort of the changes or higher level risks are kind of looked at, and certainly if we've got something new, then it might be right. Okay, well, have we looked at this properly? Where if it's whether it be the AGP or the town ranger service, making sure that those, with everyone's experience and knowledge of what's going on in the council and what we're doing, to say, right, has everyone thought about everything that they possibly could? Have we got everything covered in the right way?
Right, okay. So
That would cover most things though, but in Richard's example where someone thought it was a 4 and actually it ought to have been a 12, if you're looking for the ones that are high risk, you could potentially miss the ones that have been categorised as low, potentially, couldn't you? That, ones like, I mean, I'm not sure how likely that sort of scenario would be, but that would then slip through the net, wouldn't it, this one?
If it was like a risk in isolation that was low and had been low for a long time, then potentially, but
Take the horses at the Christmas carnival, for example. They obviously thought for a number of years that horses were totally fine at the Christmas carnival.
no, it was just a one-off that the councillor has horses, so you use them in the.
So, but someone who's very good with horses might go, that's obviously clearly no problems. I know horses inside out and that's really absolutely fine. And I go, I really don't like horses. I don't know what to do around them. They're totally massive and scary. And I might say it was a 12. So if Vicky did it, then she'd put it down as a 3 and then you wouldn't then review it because Vicky put it down as a 3.
It's not.
So in that scenario, as it would be a new risk, it will be highlighted more in the risk register.
Right.
So that's why we've stepped away from deleting a load of risks and added new ones. So it would be a new amendment, like a new risk as part of the event. So it would then be highlighted. So it would be more prominent for everyone to review.
Right.
There's really just discussion, isn't it? With everybody.
So just coming back to my earlier point, just as an example, sort of to pick out one of your ones. So for example, you've got website, loss of website, etc., etc. Then you have mitigating arrangements. New website provider may offer cloud-based systems which reduce likelihood. So I think that's good. So you've identified that there's a risk is and there's a potential mitigate. I think coming back to my sort of reporting thing, the interesting thing for me is at the end of the year, did we choose to mitigate that by going for the new provider with the cloud system? In which case, hey, maybe that's reduced the risk, or we've pushed it to it. Or did we not? And if we didn't, there may be very good reasons why we haven't chosen to do that. Like it didn't come up, or it cost more money, or whatever it was. But it's sort of, if you look down what you've got as sort of mitigating arrangements, there's sort of quite a lot of open questions of you could do this and it would reduce the risk, but not sort of reporting back on what actually did you choose to do that or not, to move it forward and reduce those risks. And if it did it?
This is learning from what we've, learning from our decisions when.
And is it significant and what's the next thing we could add on? Or if we can't do that, would we look at trying to do something else?
Okay.
I think it's just trying to encapsulate what you're doing is actively managing the risks rather than just putting them down and identifying them.
And was it the right? And was it the right decision?
And there might be some good reasons why you don't do what it could be to reduce the risk, because it has another knock-on effect somewhere else, which increases the risk.
So I think it's a good framework, and I think, if you're training people, that's good. I don't know if this needs to be spelled out, but in your monitoring and reporting, and you've got a risk officer as well, but I think there needs to be a step in the process where getting the risk registered and on the register and following the grid, the matrix is like the step one. There has to be a step where people can sense check that and say, I disagree, right? And it could, I think everyone should have that right, right? But specifically in terms of either the risk officer or whether it's the operations manager should be accountable. But okay, I know my junior person registered as a 4, but because I've been doing this job for 20 years and I have more insight, I think it's going to be a 12. I'm going to override that. So I just want this monitoring and reporting step to sort of, I'm not saying you go through everything every time, but there needs to be an open question. Have we got this right? Do we want to make an adjustment?
Certainly it's, so at the minute, the way the process works is if it's officers carrying out the individual risks, then CNT will review those risks and will
CNT already have that responsibility.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, all right, that's fine.
So Alison, what would you say then? Just put another column in this.
I think you could have another column to do it from year to year, it's just so that at the end of the day, particularly for sort of a council type of review, you can look down it and go, there was all these things they were going to do and they've tried looking at doing these and some have succeeded and some haven't. And
Well, and many of them, you just have NA, wouldn't you? Like not applicable.
well,
not applicable.
lots of these don't have mitigation and presume that's
So
because
technically, this is the business continuity plan.
Yeah, I think that's the next
Which is
agenda item,
sorry,
sorry.
but it's kind of related.
Yeah,
Okay. Right, just conscious of time. So thank you for answering our questions. Are there any more questions from the committee on the risk management strategy? And vote to accept it?
yeah, and for it to be forwarded on to council at the end of the month.
Okay, all those in favour of accepting and coming forward to council? Thank you. Right. Okay, let's get on to the main event, which is business continuity. And actually write schedules about this contract. Okay, do you want to lead us through?
Thank you. So it's similar to the previous item. The business continuity plan is reviewed each year and is reviewed by the accounts and risk subcommittee before being presented here. In summary, the documents used when an incident has occurred to ensure that we can get back up and running as quickly as possible. In my time here, the only time I feel like it's really been used when we had the death of the Queen and making sure that everything was communicated properly across to everyone, so everyone was aware and knew their roles as part of the continuity plan. But happy to take any questions.
I guess my question, to pick up on earlier, would be how does this then interface back into the risk register? Because obviously a lot of it, you would say, identifying a lot of the risks of the continuity of the service for the
Because
council.
this might be the solution for the risk that's identified by the risk register. It's your business continuity plan.
Yeah.
For example.
Correct, but it also identifies what the outcome of risks may be
Yeah.
as well.
So I guess if there's any sort of overlap between the two documents, I can certainly.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Just one should inform the other. I mean, don't over-engineer it. Well, one
Should be consistent.
It should be consistent, actually. That one should inform the other, and it may be that you're identifying some. I mean, it seems to me your business continuity plan is you're ensuring those things you need to run your operations on an ongoing basis are safe and secure. And what happens if something falls down, whatever. So that makes sense. But I guess your risk register is also things that are just external risks that you try to control. So it's the Venn diagram. There's an overlap. It's not a complete overlap. There's
It's mostly a subset. Most of this is a subset of the
Yeah.
risks, I would have thought.
I have a kind of historical question I would like to ask. For example, you have this continuity plan. During COVID, I assume, so remember we have a shortfall of budget, so the precepts and the actual spending. So we depend on the commercial income and things like that, and investment income. During COVID, I assume that shortfall is there, right? We don't have enough money to cover all of the expenditure, or the shortfall between the percent and expenditure. Because of the COVID happened, everything is shut down, and that is a real shortfall. So how do we cater for that in the past, and things like that?
So actually, COVID is a good example for us as a council, because yes, we did have a big shortfall in income, but we also reduced our expenditure every way we could. So there wasn't a shortfall over COVID. We managed to manage our budgets accordingly. So there wasn't a shortfall. We managed to reduce our expenditure enough to cover the shortfall in income.
Okay, that's good. So, for example, if something happened, and because we are talking about risk and continuity right now, what we have in contingency that we can cater for that shortfall?
So we've got the general fund reserve that would be used if we were unable to fund any shortfall, if there was another big event that meant that our income would reduce. If our expenditure had to stay the same, but we weren't getting the same level of income, then we'd have to look to use our general fund reserve. That's what that's there for. And so we tend to keep that at a level of about 4 or 5 months. I think it's at the minute, I think in the budget paper. So we've got it's 5 months of our net revenue expenditure covered in that. So that's a big part of our contingency, if you like, that will be used in that sort of event.
And taking that example, so we were talking earlier about the commercial income piece. So presumably on the risk register, and apologies if I should have already read this, but on the risk register, not getting that commercial income will be a risk. And presumably the mitigants to that are, is it reducing expenditure, or is it taking money from reserves, as an example?
So I think it would depend on how the council felt. I think the first instant would be to look at reducing expenditure budgets and sort of an options appraisal given to everyone about what we could do and what the ramifications of that would be, versus using some of the reserves that we've got.
I suppose it was just from a sort of straight technical point of view, wondering what the risk register said. Or the risk is that. What does the risk register? Does it give option? Does it give optionality, or does it give a suggestion, or does it just identify the risk and then it's up to?
I think the risk register did have procedures, so they list out very detailed steps about how to mitigate certain risks. So we just follow it one by one. It seems to me the register is designed in a way that you just follow one by one, and then you will naturally mitigate the risk that you originally put in the risk register.
Okay.
Unless it's like very one-off special kind of thing of didn't happen.
Yeah, in most of it, it's not a procedure manual, if you like, about what we'll do if a certain thing happens. It's more with that kind of example, it'll be a case of there'll be a big sort of council decision required about how this has happened. What are we going to do to fund the budget gap, if you like?
I might have I'm quite interested just from a technical point of view as to how you identify that and then describe it actually.
And for the 4 to 5 month buffer, if I can call it, so when there's a good year in terms of commercial income, do we intentionally put the extra? So in addition to the shortfall,
Mhm.
we might earn much more than before. And then do we put, like, in the good days, we put extra bit back to that general reserve to build up that general reserve? Or we just build it up to 5 months or 6 months, and then we tend to, what do we build a higher buffer in the good days, or how do you use that money?
We do, so at year end, the decision will be made, if we're in if we've got favourable variance, if there's specific projects, then we might put some funds into an earmarked reserve, but it has to be for a specific project. If there are no specific projects, then amounts will be put into the general reserve. The guidance for the general fund reserve is between 3 and 6 months of your net revenue. So at the minute, we're say 4.5, 5, so we're in a good position. There's probably, if you were to get to 6 months, then there's no point in putting any more, and then you'd have to look at your budgets to work out why you've always got underspends and look at things that way. But if it's required, then we certainly would look to increase the amount put into general fund reserves at year end, but that decision will be taken then. So if this year is a good year, when we get to year end, then we'll certainly look to increase the general fund reserve.
Because we're 97,000 less, aren't we, than 2023, according to 12.3, aren't we? So, should be maintained at 500,000, it says. Is that because we're having a good year?
So
So in 12.1, it said in 2023, we had general reserves of 597,000.
Yeah. So we
And we have said, you said it was a good idea, to maintain at 500,000.
so it should be around that level. There's no there's no definitive amount that legislation that says it has to be at this exact level.
Yeah.
You have to have 500,000, or it has to be 3 months or 6 months. It's all
Okay. Right.
that's it. It's just guidance rather than legislation, if you like.
It's quite, sorry, I was just looking at the risk register, which I haven't looked at previously. I'm slightly surprised it doesn't weight risks as, so if I take the example of commercial income, for whatever reason, commercial income, that's a big risk with serious potential impacts, etc. And sorry, very briefly, it doesn't seem to sort of categorize them into the top 10 risks per se, for example, and how that, so there's lots of, it's actually, there's a lot of risks in their register, multiple risks around staff using cars, for example, 20 different risks of what might happen if a member of staff uses a car, without sort of having those big ones to, or see the big ones to focus and the mitigants of how to deal with those. Is that right? Is it sort of listing every risk rather than sort of trying to categorize them into this is the top 10? And
so the risks are grouped together by activity.
yeah,
If I suppose I can order them
but I suppose if you were thinking of and apologies, but if you're thinking there's several hundred here, and for example, as a councillor, what are the 10 risks that actually you're worried about in the council? Because of course I'm worried about what happens if a member of staff uses a car, but that's not something which I really have much to do with mitigating. Whereas if I take something like no commercial income comes in, that is something which I do have a real interest in.
Well, what you could do is develop the 10 biggest ones and then review them each council meeting.
I mean, that's certainly one way of doing it, is to have a top 10, top 20, and then one of the committees or councils or whatever, one of their tasks
Council meeting.
is to look at what are the top 20 and whether some should be moved up to it and some should be dropped down from it. I just think using these types of risk tools is really, it's become a big thing, particularly in the last 5 years, as to how to manage businesses, but I think it's equally applicable here. But you do have to, I think, sort of put the systems into use and to get the value out of it. I'm not 100% sure, if I'm completely honest, that this is doing that, although I think there's lots of really useful data here, but from that high level of actually what are the risks and how we manage them.
And what I think you and Councillor Ellis are proposing is that we have essentially a report of the top 10 or 20 risks brought back to council, and to be sure that the analysis is correct and the mitigations are appropriate.
I mean, that's what happens at board meetings that I go to.
Correct.
But I think one of the key question is that although they can propose the top 10, but as a councillors, do we have our top 10 in mind, which it might not necessarily all the same as the central team thing about the top 10.
Well, I think quite often what you do is you list and then select the top.
Yeah, things like that. I think we have to.
So you get a bit of a crossover of
I
it.
think we have to have a list, and then we all sit down and discuss which are the top 10 out of the top 20.
Well, I think that partly is whatever the risk committee should be doing, is sort of coming up with a
Yeah, I think so.
first cut of.
That's quite an involved conversation. I think it's the job of the people running the council to actually do that analysis. I think we're here to kind of govern and quality assure that analysis. And if you think anything's been missed out, so we've just missed the point here, and this thing is something I should be worried about.
I think that can be done. For example, in the risk register, we just sort using the sort function to sort out all those that is top likelihood and top impact and red flag, and then we have a list of what do you think about the top 20 or top 10. But I think it's a chicken and egg question that if you put down in that kind of format, it's just like, and then we might, well, we can brainstorm, but we can try it first. But I do think that, for example, commercial income, it is a very important risk, but it's not something that can be mitigated by a risk register. It is.
No, but there are things you can do to mitigate commercial. For example, taking longer contracts, or there are various things to think about. Yeah, or cutting expense. I mean, my start point would be there's 94 pages in the risk register. The best one in the world. Not many people are. I'm not about to read 94 pages either. But without some sorting of it to look at what the first page or 2 pages are, if you don't watch out, it just never gets looked at.
So on the reporting on page 46, 13.3 says we already have a process that says reports on the risk, including the risk register, will be presented to the Accounts and Risk Subcommittee and the Corporate Policy and Finance Committee on any significant changes as appropriate. We're kind of relying on your judgment to do that. In addition to that, via the Accounts and Sub-Risk Committee, and then this committee will produce an annual report on the current risk register. So I think we already have that step in the process where there is a reporting on the risk management, and it's done on an annual basis.
But is it just added to,
Done on all the
rather than
risks.
what I was just saying, of just you should take stuff off as well as put stuff on, or is stuff so just how important?
Well, it should be relevant. I'm
Yeah, that's what I
assuming
mean.
that if a risk is no longer a risk, then it's not on the register. I'm assuming.
There's part of that, but as I say, for me, I think it's around trying to identify what the significance were that people
Yeah.
should be focused on in the context of 94 pages of risk,
Yeah.
all of
Okay.
which are useful in a detail level, but
I think that's why the colour coding was brought in, just to try and highlight the ones that have been removed or amended.
Yeah.
And just to try and give some peace of mind that if there is no colouring, then it's a risk that's been in there for a long time, and hasn't been changed, and it's obviously, it's worked up until that point.
And totally understand why a lot of those things, I'm looking at one at the moment, illness of the mayor, deputy mayor, dignitaries, or others attending. Obviously, a risk, but not something that I expect to get up to those upper levels.
Okay. So are we proposing to do something different?
I think I would propose that we have a highlighted by combination of the council through the risk committee to the council meeting as a whole, what
The top 10.
top 10, the top 20, which we select the top 10 of the risks.
Okay, so we have an annual report to do that. Are we proposing a more frequent report?
I would have thought you're doing it more like every 6 months to get real value out of it. But it shouldn't change very much. There should be one comes on and one comes, and there's no change. But it's still reporting back, well, these are the top 10 risks and it hasn't changed.
Or something's happened.
Or something's happened.
There's material variation. Okay, so I think that's really good conversation. So I think what I'm hearing from the committee is we'd like a more frequent update based on either a material variation, if I may use that language, and secondly, no less frequently than every 6 months. And we would go via the accounts and risk subcommittee and then this corporate policy and finance committee. Do we want that to go up to the council as well?
I think it ought to be, because it ought to be how the council's managing the risk.
Okay.
Okay,
So I think we're making that, so that looks like an amendment to not so much the business continuity, but actually the risk strategy on section 13, which is the monitoring. So we'd like that to be, to that report to be presented actually every 6 months instead of every year. And secondly, if there's any material variations in the risk.
It's a table, a one-pager table.
okay.
Does that make sense then?
Yeah, and just see,
Have you got capacity to do that then?
hopefully. I'm just thinking how best to word it in the minutes for this meeting, because if for the risk strategy and risk register, we're happy with it as is, and with the business continuity plan, we're happy with it as is for it to go on to council to be approved, then
So I think.
is it more something for a forward plan rather than
My suggestion would be that what we say is that in addition to the risk register and the continuity strategy, we would like to see a report to council every 6 months highlighting the top 10 risks, top 20 risks, impact and severity.
And do we want a mitigation, what the mitigation is for each?
Well, I think it just needs to be a table that says impact. I mean, it is a subset of what's already here.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't expect it to change very much.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't require very much to do. It's just picking those.
Yeah,
out.
you've got the source data already. You
Yeah,
just
yeah.
need to, once, twice a year, and then as Councillor Rose said, if there's a material change to one of the key risks, then you bring that to our attention as well.
yeah, so I just wonder if we approve the agenda items as they are, but I add to the forward planner that for either March or June for this committee, to then I can go through, pull something together, it can then be reviewed by the council risk, and come here, make sure everyone here is happy with it.
Okay, well, you have to, I'm still getting my head around the forward plans and stuff like that. But I think we're proposing actually in the strategy itself, we've already got section 13, which is your monitoring and reporting section,
okay.
which is very good. It's essentially just an amendment to item 13.3. As we're saying, we'd like this to be
okay.
twice a year instead of once a year, plus if there's a material variation. I think if we can make that amendment to 13.3, then I'm sensing the committee would support that, and then we can just take that to council for approval.
Okay,
Is that a fair summary of the discussion?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we want to re-vote on the strategy again? Because I think we have
yeah,
amended all
just to
all those in
formalise.
favour of, okay, thank you very much. And thank you for the attention to detail, everybody. Are there any, if we just sort of jump forward again to the business continuity plan, any further comments or questions on that? I have a question about the risk of hacking and ransomware. I think it's a very live issue. This is a growth industry, and we see what's happened to the British Library and NHS and other institutions. I'm by no means an IT expert, but my sense is that operations that are vulnerable are those where you're basically hosting your own systems on your own servers. I think, please correct me if I've got this wrong, if you're using cloud services hosted by Oracle and Google and Microsoft, you are less likely, not invulnerable, but less likely to be affected. Okay, but essentially this is a live risk, and there are gangs out there that are targeting, with all due respect, sort of smaller organisations because you're less defended than Shell or British Aerospace or whoever it is. Okay, so so I like the way you sort of set these out, but I guess the key thing is, I mean, systematically, it's about designing the infrastructure so that you're less vulnerable, in addition to having a mitigation plan. So it's almost like the pre-business continuity strategy. So the more things you have on the cloud, the more things you have hosted by Amazon or Oracle versus your own server in the basement or somewhere, the less structurally vulnerable you are. So I'm just wondering whether, in addition to this business continuity plan, we have a sort of ongoing strategy to just move us to a safer IT infrastructure.
I think that's a classic example of that's on the risk register, and that probably would make about number 10 on the risk register.
Yeah.
And part of the strategy for that would be to I think that's a fairly common one actually for businesses to have. Is that as an example of a risk, which is not number one, but it's certainly in the top 20.
Yeah.
And it's certainly something that can be mitigated, not necessarily for much money.
Okay.
Can't you just set it up so that you've got offsite that everything's backed up to, and then you've got your stuff you're using, and then you just, if you get someone like holding you to ransom, you delete that stuff and get.
I mean, there's a couple of. So one question with that is, well, when you make a backup, unless you make a backup every day, and there's a day when it got infected and your backup may be infected as well. So unless you have infinite backups of it, then that can be an issue. The second one, of course, is that the ransom can both be you can't get the data, or it could be that the data is released released publicly, or however. I'm not sure whether that's, but you can get into problems with GDPR and things like that anyway if you're releasing confidential information, even if you did what you try to do. But I think that's a classic one of, this is a subset of the risk.
It's dealt with on a risk register.
It's a risk, and it's one of those things that can be, it may take a bit of time. Another mitigant, a lower level mitigant is to have a backup. But I think what people have generally found is that when people go in and infect it, by definition, they leave it for a period of time.
So it gets into the
The
backup.
backup will then be infected, and then they do it. So that if the backup's done every month, then you might find if they do it after 2 months, your backup has also got the same infection to it. And it can be quite expensive even just to start getting the cyber, whatever they are, people start looking at all your systems.
It's costing the British Library £7 million apparently.
And some of it they may not be able to recreate full stop.
Yeah.
And so many NHS trusts and local authorities have this happened.
Yeah.
So as mitigating factors at the minute, we are all completely cloud-based. I'm not sure where we stand with backups through our IT provider, but we have got a IT company that look after all of
But I
it.
guess if the data's on the cloud, which means somebody else's data center, it's not your data center. That's their problem because it's sitting within, I don't know who your provider is, with Oracle or Google or somebody, or Microsoft.
I think it'd be Microsoft. We've got
So the Microsoft data center network will have multiple backup. Your data is probably in about 3 or 4 different data centers across the UK or elsewhere. So that's probably a natural backup by having the cloud itself.
I think certainly something that's been implemented recently is more training. So our IT contractor has provided lots of training. So we get fake spam emails
Phishing.
to then we get a report each month about who's actually opened them, who's clicked the link, so we can then provide more training so people are aware. And I'm just trying to think of the recent one that I did. So how they create hacks from getting your, if you do multi-factor authentication, if they, let's say, ways that gangs get around that and teaching you what to look out for. So there's lots of training going on as well. So we are doing everything we can to try.
And unfortunately, it's one of those examples of risk. At some point it will happen and you will get caught out, because just everybody does. You can only keep them out so long.
The other point of vulnerability is us. So, I mean, I'm sure you, I don't know if you have councillor Ellis, but certainly the Lib Dem team have received multiple sort of, slightly odd emails from Fiona at strange times of the day.
In our
And one of the, I'll give you a very recent example, actually, on a commercial basis, but we had one where somebody received an email that said, please pay X million pounds to this account. And what they're now capable of doing, which was they also then left a voicemail on the mobile phone of the CEO of the business, which sounded exactly like they've now AI software, they can create a voicemail, which is why banks have stopped doing voice recognition on. So when you used to be able to phone up NatWest or Coots, for example, and they would authenticate you through your voice. They've stopped doing that now, and the reason they've stopped doing that is because it can be faked. They leave a voice message, and if you get a voice message from your boss and you've had an email, you kind of go, well, you have to phone up and talk to them.
And
in
solicitors
real
as
time.
well, whenever they're handling large amounts of money, I've just noticed they say, we will send you bank details through the post, not through email.
Or through multiple sources, so.
Yeah,
you've
I mean, the
got
one I
WhatsApp
saw
plus
was,
email,
and I had a
never just one source.
if that email's compromised, then people have sent their customers, please pay. Yeah,
However good your organisation is, and there are lots of really big organisations, they all at some point, some vulnerability get
It's
done.
normally
So-
human vulnerability, isn't it?
Correct. And so at some point it'll happen. It's been a long time.
It sounds like you're doing the right things. When the companies I've worked for have had similar sort of training, and you get sort of the IT team will send through sort of fake spam emails, and you get, congratulated if you reject them, or training if you haven't. Okay. All right, you've answered my questions very well, thank you. Right, do you have any more questions from the committee on the business continuity plan? Okay, are we going to move to accept, please? All those in favour? Very good, thank you. Is there any exempt business? Thank you. Okay. Any other business from the committee? Right, duly close the meeting. Thank you very much.
thank you.